I am like working out in the gym so hard, and I'm doing my protein loading and I'm doing tons of strength training.
Yeah.
And it's incredible how hard it is to build muscle.
Yeah.
So can you start with just helping us understand if there were some basic muscle building principles for women over 40, what would they be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 4 things that I focus on that are really important.
Amazing.
Especially for women over 40.
Okay.
Now, the first one, and this might surprise you, don't get injured.
Oh.
Okay, so this has to take priority over everything else for this group.
Okay.
Okay, because as we said, injuries are easier to cause.
Yeah.
Because of the change. They also get worse they get more common with age in both genders.
Yeah.
So you've got age working against you, and the actual quality of the tissue does decrease slightly as we get older.
Okay.
And when you're injured, it takes longer to heal.
Yeah.
As you said, with the women you helped, if they're peri or postmenopausal, those soft tissue injuries are going to take longer. So there's muscle strains and tendon tears. It could be twice the length of time it takes for a 20-something
Right.
to get better. So a soft tissue injury can be catastrophic for your progress.
Okay.
So this is the vein I start with for everyone that runs through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Just don't get injured.
Okay, so on that, let me walk through a scenario.
Yes.
So I decided at the end of December that I was going to start doing more strength training. I hired a trainer, and I was like, I'm going to go 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And I told her, I'm like, I want to lift really heavy weights.
Yeah.
And at some point, about 8 weeks in, I started feeling a funky shoulder thing. And then I happened to go play tennis that week, and I hadn't played in a while. And that shoulder thing got a little bit harder.
Yes.
And then I kept doing my old technique of like, let me push through it.
Yeah.
And it kept getting worse and worse until I had to do nothing.
Sure.
So where along that journey, just because some people will say, well, I have aches in my joints. Does that mean I shouldn't work out? Like, what does it mean to not get injured? And at what point do we, read the body's warning signs and just say, okay, I need to rest now?
So I think we all have these problem areas in our body, and we all kind of know where our problem areas are. Maybe it's a past injury that you picked up when you were younger, or maybe it's just something that, your knee just nags from time to time.
Yeah.
If you know you have that problem, one of the most important things to do is to make sure that you're trying to almost proactively manage it.
Yeah.
So that might mean paying extra attention to it in the warm-up before you start.
Okay.
And that brings me on to another important topic, is that your warm-up is incredibly important when you're going through the menopause and afterwards. Much more important than when you were in your teens and 20s.
Right. Okay.
So coming at it from the lens of a man, when I was 18 years old, I could go into the gym. I could however much weight I wanted on the bar, and I could lift it, and I wouldn't feel anything. Even if it was bad technique, even if I hadn't warmed up, I was fine. Fast forward to 32. I can't really do that now. I do have to have a little bit of a warm up. Otherwise, I do get an ache in my back, or I do get a funky shoulder.
Right.
But it takes me about 2 or 3 minutes to warm up, and then I'm good to go.
Okay.
Now, that length of time will increase with age, and especially for females as well.
Okay.
So if you spent 5 minutes warming up when you're in your 30s, you're probably looking at 15 or 20.
Oh, wow.
Now. Yeah.
And what's a warm-up look like?
So a myth about a warm-up is that it's just to get on a treadmill and walk for 10 minutes, or to get on a bike and cycle for 10 minutes. I'm afraid if we're lifting weights or if we're playing sport, it doesn't really cut it. It can help.
Right.
And it's good if you're physically cold.
Right.
So if you are, middle of winter, it's -5 outside, whatever that is in Fahrenheit for you.
Yeah.
And
we don't have winter in California. but I can.
We do here.
Yeah. Right.
But if you're very, very cold, warming up the body to raise core temperature is fine. Okay. But you need to be practicing the movements you're going to be doing at speed.
Oh.
Slowly and controlled, and building up to the load you're going to be using.
Okay.
So if we're talking about resistance training, and let's say you've got your funky shoulder, right? Yeah. And you want to go and do some bench press.
Yeah.
So what you might do is you would go in and you would take a very, very light dumbbell and just start doing some nice slow rotations to almost warm up that rotator cuff. Okay. The next thing you would do is you would go over to the bench, the exercise you're going to be doing, and practice the movement with no weight.
Okay.
Just to make sure that movement pattern is almost solidified in your brain.
Right.
So your body knows what's coming. It's starting to get ready for what you're actually about to do next.
Amazing.
Okay. Then you might put on 50% of the weight that you're going to use.
Yep.
So very light weights, again, just practicing that movement, but this time doing more repetitions just so you can feel that kind of warmth in the muscle.
Right.
It's warming up.
Right.
Shoulder should feel warm at this point, not painful.
Okay.
It should feel warm. Then we slowly, incrementally increase the weight, getting closer and closer to the working set.
Okay.
But dropping the reps.
Right.
And then when you feel ready, that's when you start your first working set.
And what's ready though?
If you are doing the warm-up, to take you back to your question, and the pain isn't going away, it's getting worse, I would then classify that as an injury. And you probably shouldn't do that exercise until it's fixed.
Okay.
Which means it needs some special attention. The second thing is resistance training.
Yeah.
So this is absolutely key. And every single year that goes by, more and more research is coming out for the benefits of resistance training for every age group.
Yeah.
And I would say particularly for 40 plus.
Yeah.
And even when you get to 70, 80 years old, there's huge benefits to it.
Right.
So if I had one message to get out to people, it's that everyone should have some kind of resistance training practice if they can.
Right. Okay. So on that, I will tell you, there's a couple of things. I'm just going to, again, tell you the concerns as a 54-year-old woman. So as testosterone goes down, which can happen, especially if you have a high stress, I've found that my ability to do resistance training, like there's just no juice in the muscles anymore. And I don't crave that kind of workout like I did before. Do we have a hack for that? Because I think a lot of women feel the same. Should you and should you start with light weights and then work yourself up? Should you do body weights? Like give me a little more of what do you do if you really don't like resistance training?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
They all work. So light weights, heavy weights, body weight.
Okay.
It all works. It all counts. Yeah. And the research into these things is really interesting. So we used to think that to build stronger muscles and bigger muscles, you have to go on the heavy side. Yeah. Okay. And that's kind of what everyone almost believes when they're coming in.
Yes.
And sometimes I find that, especially for the women that I help, like you say, that the desire to go and lift heavy weights is not always there.
No.
And the energy might not be there for it.
Yeah.
Well, recent research is now showing you can build an equal amount of muscle with light weights as you can heavy.
Okay.
So you don't have to do that. You can go in and you can do 15, 20, 25 repetitions of a lighter weight.
Okay.
And you're going to get very, very similar results when it comes to muscle gain and maintenance.
So isn't the logic to fatigue a muscle?
Correct.
And if you fatigue a muscle, it breaks down and builds itself stronger.
Exactly.
So what I'm hearing in that is there's two ways to fatigue a muscle. Lift a bunch of, pick up a heavy weight and within a few reps, you've now fatigued it, or pick up a light weight and do more reps and fatigue it that way.
100%. So the goal is the same. We have to finish the set and feel fatigued.
Yes.
If we don't have that fatigue, nothing has really happened.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you say, which I really like, is your brilliant body.
Yeah.
And your body is an adaptation machine. So it adapts to the stimuli that we place on it. And if the stimulus is enough to tell the body something, it will adapt. So with resistance training, what we're essentially doing is we're stimulating the muscle to say, you need to be stronger.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be doing this more often. And if you don't get stronger, you're not going to be able to cope. And the muscle responds by saying, I better start laying down more amino acids, growing in size and also strength.
Yeah.
Now, if we're doing a set and we pick up a very light weight that we could probably do 30 repetitions, but we just do 10 and then we put it down. Yeah. The stimulus hasn't reached the muscle. The signal's not there. So the muscle goes, well, I can already do this.
So we're going to use my 84-year-old mama as an example.
I love it. These are my favorite people to work with.
Yeah. So, bless her heart. Yeah. She's never been like a very athletic person.
Yes.
And so as she went through menopause and aged, swimming was her thing. Yes. And so she would go and do laps in the pool. And I remember she would feel and then she would go and sit at the machines and do a few reps. But I watched her do all of this and one day in the gym, and I thought, she's not really pushing herself, but she feels good about herself in doing that. So if she goes in and just does what feels comfortable, is she doing anything worth it? Is it helping?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So A, the mental benefits are massive.
Yeah.
And B, if your goal is to maintain rather than to build, you don't have to do as much.
Okay.
So this isn't backed by peer-reviewed data. This is just kind of the accepted principle within the world of muscles.
Right.
It takes about a third of the effort and volume to maintain as it does to build. Does that make sense? So if she's going in there and she's just doing a few exercises, she's doing her sets of 10. She could have probably done 15 if she was really pushing, but she does 10 and she feels it a bit in the muscle and she feels good. She's definitely going to be going some way to maintaining it 100%.
So if you're over 40 and you never do any resistance training, your muscles breaking down?
I'm afraid that the research is showing us that sarcopenia, which is muscle loss with age, over the age of 50, this is where the data is, it's happening at a rate of about 8% per decade if you don't do anything about it.
Okay.
Now, you might be thinking, well, that's less than 1% per year. It doesn't sound too bad.
Right.
But 8% might be the difference between being able to open a heavy door and not.
That's right.
Or being able to get out of a chair and not. It's huge.
Yeah.
And if we can just put a halt to it, rather than trying to get, jacked and big and strong, if we can just maintain what we've got, we're going to do huge things for our independence and mobility.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because my dad had knee surgery and like a knee replacement. I remember helping him in the initial days afterwards move his body out into a new position in the chair.
Yes.
And he couldn't use his leg, obviously.
Yeah.
It was in a straight out. And he went to go lift his body out of the chair with his arms.
Yes.
And he struggled a bit. And I pointed out to him, I was like, Dad, when you heal, we need to get your arms strong again because you need to be able to get yourself out of a chair. I think when you're 40 and 50, you're like, get out of a chair. I'll always be able to do that.
Yeah.
But can you talk just about is that a serious thing that when you get into your 70s and 80s, people struggle with something as simple as getting out of a chair?
So I came up with this idea of how do we use our community and come together to support organizations that are lifting women up. I will be profiling some of these incredible nonprofits that are raising up women that really need some extra support. Give like a girl. We are more powerful together, and I'm so excited to announce this project to you.
It's something I help people with all the time at the practice.
Okay.
And it's quite frightening how bad people can get to before they notice.
Okay.
And if you start in your 60s using your hands to push up from the chair and that just becomes a habit, suddenly when you can't use your arm because you've injured it or there's no arms on the chair and you can't get out of the chair, that can be quite frightening.
Right.
But it's very slow and it's very subtle. It happens insidiously over time.
Yeah.
So this must 8% per decade. That's not fast.
Right.
So you wouldn't notice it year on year, but decade on decade, you're going to notice a really big difference.
Yes.
And when you get to that point, it's harder to regain it than it is to just maintain it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, if I could go back to my 40-year-old self, I would be like, stop running because we live in Northern California, beautiful mountains that you can go run. And it's like, get me out in nature and run. And that's like the greatest, antidepressant on the planet. So I was running a lot, but I would tell her, stop running, start lifting, because I started to become really serious about lifting again in my early 50s. And it's hard.
It's hard.
It's so hard to build muscle.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Really hard.
Okay, so that's number 2 is resistant training.
Can I just add before we go on any further, Mindy, people often say, well, if I'm 60, 70 or even 40, 50, I can't build muscle like I used to. Is there any point? And I saw a study just 2 years ago, which was with actually older people. So we're looking at people over 70 years old.
Right.
And the goal of the study was to find out, can people still build muscle in this age group? We think they can, but can they?
Right.
So they did a randomized controlled trial, 10 weeks of resistance training Okay. These people are all over 70. They went to the gym 3 times a week for an hour, and they had like a guided exercise routine. Okay. So they're doing resistance training, 3 sets of 10, that kind of thing.
Right.
And what they found was these people in 10 weeks, they increased their muscle mass by 3 pounds.
Wow.
They decreased their fat mass by 4 pounds at the same time.
Right.
And they increased their resting metabolic rate by 7%.
Wow.
So they burned 7% more calories just to stay alive.
Just in 10 weeks.
Just in 10 weeks.
That's amazing.
If you could give me those results in 10 weeks, I'd snap your hand off.
That's right. That's right.
And one of the nice things as well, and this is probably one of the only free lunches in health, is that if you're untrained and you've never been to the gym before, your results in the first 10 to 12 are going to be amazing.
Yes, they are.
Because your body is getting all these stimuli. It doesn't know what to do with it. So it just builds all this muscle and loses fat probably at the same time.
Wow.
So if you've never trained before and you think, well, you know, that's all right for you, Will, like you've done it for a while and you're confident. I'm not confident. And, you know, these results are going to take ages. You're going to get results quickly if you stick to it.